The BBC, from their Have I Got News For You Twitter, is now calling for violence against Nigel Farage. We had that incident recently where this character showed up at Farage's campaign stop in Barnsley and threw concrete at him before being satisfyingly wrestled to the ground by a cop who was actually doing his job. Met Police take note. That last bit is worth a closer look with sound. In response, BBC franchise Have I Got News For You, no great surprise there, had this to say. Potentially dangerous objects thrown at Nigel Farage on his open-top campaign bus, thought to be copies of the Reform Manifesto. So in one fell swoop they show their disdain for reform, they're dangerous, and also make a joke about physical violence against Nigel Farage, and so tacitly endorse it while hiding behind the "it's only a joke, ha ha ha." The eagle-eyed might have noticed that the BBC do distance themselves from liability here. This account is run by Hattrick, who make Have I Got News For You. The BBC have asked us to point out that it's nothing to do with them. Fine, the BBC franchise is calling for potentially lethal violence against Nigel Farage. That's okay then. And of course it's not the first time that a BBC franchise has called for violence against him. After he had a milkshake thrown at him in 2019, the lovely Jo Brand had this to say on another BBC show: why is it always the BBC?
Certain unpleasant characters are being thrown to the fore, and they're very, very easy to hate. And I'm kind of thinking, why bother with a milkshake when you could get some battery acid? That's just me, and it's all right. I'm not going to do it. It's purely a fantasy, but I think milkshakes are pathetic. I honestly do.
Note not just Jo Brand making a joke about throwing a lethal substance at him and so giving it the whiff of respectability, but also the audience's obvious delight.
When you could get some battery acid.
So there's an obvious theme emerging of acceptable violence against people whose opinions you dislike. I made an unlovely comment, and you will note that their call to violence has now disappeared because they deleted it. That's what you get if you click that link there. I think they must have ultimately decided that the "oh well, this is nothing whatsoever to do with the BBC" was not considered ultimately sufficient distancing. And this was not the end of the theme of left-wing hardcore violence against Farage. Labour councillor Kevin Osborne: warm welcome from Barnsley for Nigel Farage and his brand of intolerance and ignorance. Students and acolytes sent him packing with the planned walkabout cancelled. Proud of Barnsley, you bet I am. Images were also included of a sign saying FUCK Farage on the campaign bus, and if you look at the time at 12:10, this was posted after the incident, which was in the morning. It had already happened, so it was specifically what this Labour councillor was rejoicing in when he made this comment. Then you have an ex-left-wing Labour mayor, spot the theme here, on the BBC, spot the theme here, trying to not sound like he's saying it's Farage's fault, while saying it's his fault.
What happened around Nigel was not an acceptable, not an intelligent form of protest. What I can't pretend, though, is that he hasn't fed into a culture of anger and hatred and othering that ends up manifesting in this kind of aggressive type of politics.
Stoning is acceptable punishment for anyone advocating for the end of illegal immigration, etc. That's what he's trying to pretend that he's not saying while saying it. So you've got rock throwing incident, which could have resulted in who knows what injuries, BBC franchise making a joke about it and so in effect legitimising it with supposed humour, a current Labour councillor also very happy about what happened, and an ex-Labour mayor basically blaming Farage. He had it coming. The BBC is claimed to be impartial. Clearly this does not extend to their franchises, even those as well known and associated with the BBC as Have I Got News For You. Not only can they be partial, but they can joke about this kind of violence and so legitimise it. I knew they'd end up deleting that comment, which is why I took a screenshot of it. You can repost it if you would like to, share it, whatever, feel free. The link is down below in the description box as usual. None of this is intended to directly stop people from wanting to vote for the target in question. If anything, it increases the target's appeal because people don't like bullies, and the perpetrators know that perfectly well, of course, and the people cheering them on and legitimising them know it as well. It is intended to intimidate them into reducing their exposure to the public for fear of attack, so that fewer people will see them and fewer people will then vote for them in that way. It remains to be seen how well it ultimately works.